Hello, students. You are welcome to the new lecture on uh, how to link International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights with directive principles of state policies. Earlier, we have linked International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights with fundamental rights as given in Indian Constitution, because civil and political rights are enumerated in the chapter on fundamental rights, while social, economic, and cultural rights are largely mentioned under in Part 4 of Indian Constitution that deals with India with the directive principles of state policy. Uh, Let us see how we can link ICSCR and DPSPs. The International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, adopted in 1966, while India's directive principles of state policies in Part 4, ranging from Articles 36 to 51, share a common moral and constitutional vision. The creation of a welfare state, ensuring social, economic, and cultural security to all the people. Both emphasize that political democracy must be complemented by social and economic justice, while the ICESCR imposes international legal obligations on states to progressively realize rights such as work, health, education, and housing. The directive principles provide constitutional guidance to the Indian state for achieving similar objectives domestically. The DPSPs are not justiciable but fundamental in the governance of the country, as clearly stated in Article 37, while ICESCR rights are subject to progressive realization. Together, they reflect a moral duty on governments to ensure dignity, equality, and development. India, being a state party to this covenant since 1979, has implemented many of its principles through legislation and judicial interpretations, demonstrating deep harmony between international human rights commitments and national constitutional goals. Both the ICESCR and the DPSPs are founded on the belief that human dignity cannot be achieved without securing economic social rights. The preamble of the covenant calls for freedom from want, while the preamble to the Indian Constitution promises justice, social, economic, and political. The philosophical basis of both the instruments lies in the idea that democracy is incomplete without equality of opportunity and fair distribution of wealth. That means we need to juxtapose political democracy and economic democracy. The Covenant emphasizes progressive realization, and the DPSPs urge the state to endeavor to secure similar goals. Article 38 of the Constitution directs the states to promote a social order based on justice, paralleling Article 2 of the ICESCR, which requires states to utilize maximum available resources to advance economic and social rights. Thus, both reflect the moral vision of the welfare state, transforming political freedom into meaningful human development. The DPSPs from Articles 36 to 51 correspond closely to various articles of this covenant from Articles 6 to 15. Article 41 of the Constitution ensures the right to work, education, and public assistance, echoing Article 6, right to work, and Articles 9, social security of the ICESCR. Article 42, which provides for humane conditions of work and maternity relief, reflects Article 7 and Article 10 of the Covenant. Similarly, Article 47 of the Constitution directs the state to improve public health and nutrition, which aligns with Article 12 of the ICESCR, that is right to health. Article 45 promotes early childhood care and education parallel to Article 13, that is right to education. These correspondence reveal that India's framers were remarkably forward-looking, embedding the core social economic ideals of the Covenant even before its adoption by the United Nations. The Constitution thereby functioned as a domestic counterpart to the International Covenant on Social, Cultural, Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights International Mandate. Right to work and livelihood. Right to work is central feature of both frameworks. Article 6 of the Covenant recognizes everyone's right to gain a living by freely chosen work, while Article 41 of the Indian Constitution directs the state to secure the right to work within its economic capacity. The Supreme Court, through judgments like Olga Tellers versus Bombay Municipal Corporation, 1985, expanded this principle by linking the right to livelihood with Article 21, that is, right to life. Legislative initiatives such as the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act 2005 concretize the covenants and DPSPs shared goals. Both recognize work as not only an economic necessity but a foundation for dignity and equality. Hence, while the covenant transforms it into a legal obligation, India operationalizes it as a constitutional directive realized through welfare programs and judicial innovation. Let us deal with right to health and nutrition. Article 12 of the Covenant guarantees the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, including disease control, clean environment, and maternal protection, along with mental health. Great emphasis on that. Article 47 of the Indian Constitution mirrors this by obligating the state to improve public health and nutrition. Judicial expansion under Article 21 has read the right to health into the right to life. Paschim Banga Khet Mazdoor Samiti versus State of West Bengal of the year 1996 is to be noted in this regard. Welfare schemes like National Health Mission and Ayushman Bharat fulfill these constitutional and international mandates. Both instruments recognize health as an enabler of all other rights. The integration of environmental protection through Article 48A of the Constitution also parallels the Covenant's holistic vision that human health depends on safe surroundings. And we can not be any more concerned just with physical health, but we have to take into consideration everything. Thus, both frameworks place equal emphasis on preventive and curative aspects of public health. Right to education. Education forms the cornerstone of both the covenants and the Indian constitutional philosophy. Article 13 of the covenant requires free and compulsory primary education for all and accessibility to secondary and higher education. Correspondingly, Article 45 of the Constitution directs the state to provide early childhood care and education. Later, it is reinforced by Article 21A, that is RTE or Right to Education, inserted by the 86th Amendment of 2002. Judicial interpretation in Unni Krishnan versus State of Andhra Pradesh in 1993 recognized education as part of the right to life, transforming a DPSP principle into a justiciable fundamental right. Both systems view education as the foundation of social transformation and empowerment. The covenant's emphasis on non-discrimination and cultural adaptability resonates with India's inclusive policies like Sarva Siksha Abhiyan and the National Education Policy 2020, which ensures equality and quality in education. Social security and labor welfare. Article 9 of the Covenant enshrines the right to social security, including social insurance. The directive principles advance similar objectives through Articles 41, 42, and 43, advocating for work, assistance, and living wages. Indian welfare laws such as the Employees Provident Fund Act 1952, Maternity Benefits Act 1961, which have gradually progressed, and now we have, earlier it was very limited, then 4 months, then 6 months, and code on social security 2020 operationalize these provisions. The Supreme Court has upheld these rights in cases like Dalmia Cement versus Union of India 1996, emphasizing workers' participation under Article 43A. Both the Covenant and the Constitution prioritize social security as a shield against unemployment, disability, and old age. Together, they transform social welfare and form a charitable ideal into a legal and moral obligation of the state towards every citizen. Article 11 of the Covenant guarantees an adequate standard of living, including food, clothing, and housing. While Articles 39B and 47 of the Indian Constitution directs the state to distribute resources for community welfare and improve living conditions. In Shanti Star Builders versus Narcotics Control Bureau in 1990, the Supreme Court linked housing to the right to life under Article 21. Programs like the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana represents efforts to realize this directive. Both the Covenant and DPSPs underscore that social justice demands not only access to livelihood but also adequate living conditions. They view housing and nutrition as basic components of human dignity, ensuring that economic growth translates into equitable development. Gender equality and protection of women. Gender equality is explicitly recognized in Article 3 of the Covenant and reinforced through several Indian constitutional provisions. Articles 14 and 15, Clause 3 guarantee equality and allow special measures for weaker sections, including women, while Articles 39A and D direct equal pay for equal work. Article 42 calls for maternity relief, directly mirroring the Covenant's Article 10, Clause 2. The Supreme Court's rulings in Vishakha versus State of Rajasthan 1997 and Joseph Shine versus Union of India 2018 expand gender justice as part of fundamental and directive principles. Both systems emphasize that gender equality is essential for full realization of social and economic rights. They call upon states to ensure that cultural practices or economic systems do not perpetuate discrimination. Environmental protection and sustainable development. Although the covenant does not explicitly mentions the environment, Article 12 links health to safe working and living conditions. The Indian Constitution, through Article 48A of Directive Principles and Article 51A which is part of the fundamental duty, makes environmental protection a constitutional responsibility. The Supreme Court in MC Mehta versus Union of India in 1986 integrated the right to a clean environment into Article 21. Thus, India's constitutional framework expands the Covenant's implicit environmental dimension into explicit and foreseeable principles. Sustainable development, reflected in both instruments, connects social welfare with ecological balance, affirming that true progress requires harmony between human activity and nature. Cultural rights and heritage protection. The Covenant's Article 15 recognizes everyone's right to participate in cultural life, benefit from scientific progress, and protect the moral and material interest of creators. The Indian Constitution, through Article 49, directs the state to protect monuments, and through Articles 51 AF, obliges every citizen to value and preserve India's rich cultural heritage. Article 29, Clause 1 also guarantees the right to conserve one's distinct culture. Both frameworks promote cultural pluralism and inclusivity. The Indian judiciary in Bijoy Emmanuel versus State of Kerala in 1986 upheld cultural freedom and respect for diversity as core constitutional values. Similarly, ICESCR's General Comment Number 21, 2009, stresses accessibility, participation, and contribution to cultural life. Together, these provisions highlight that culture is not merely artistic expression but a shared human right. They reinforce the duty of both the state and individuals to protect and transmit cultural traditions, scientific knowledge, and artistic creativity to future generations, ensuring that globalization does not erode cultural identity. The principle of progressive realization and non-justiciability. A key similarity between the covenant and DPSPs lies in their implementation mechanism. The covenant uses the doctrine of progressive realization under Article 12, requiring states to move towards full implementation within available resources. Similarly, Article 37 of the Indian Constitution declares that the directive principles are not enforceable by courts, but they are fundamental to governance. Both recognize economic constraints yet expect constant progress through policies and legislation. Indian courts, in cases such as Minerva Mills versus Union of India 1980 and State of Kerala versus N.M. Thomas 1976, have harmonized these directives with fundamental rights to make them effective. The distinction between legal enforceability and moral obligation fades when the judiciary interprets fundamental rights in light of directive principles. Thus, both frameworks establish a moral legal continuum where states must act proactively to realize social economic rights, even when immediate fulfillment is not financially possible. Judicial harmonization of rights and directives. Indian judiciary has played a vital role in bridging the gap between non-justiciable directive principles and enforceable fundamental rights, thereby aligning the Constitution with International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Right obligations. The Supreme Court in Keshwanand Bharti versus State of Kerala 1973 declared that both sets of provisions form part of the basic structure of the Constitution. In Unni Krishnan 1993, the court derived the right to education from Article 21, integrating Article 45 of the Directive Principles and Article 13 of the Covenant Principles. Similarly, in Olga Tellis 1985, the right to livelihood was read into Article 21, reflecting Article 6 of the Covenant. Through these decisions, the judiciary effectively domesticated the Covenant into Indian constitutional law or Indian jurisprudence. The Supreme Court continues to rely on the Covenant's provisions and general comments when interpreting social economic rights, demonstrating a consistent convergence between global human rights standards and India's constitutional jurisprudence. Legislative implementation and policy alignment. India's legislative framework demonstrates a significant compliance with the covenant. Statutes like the Manrega of 2005, Right to Education Act RTE of 2009, National Food Security Act 2013, and Code on Social Security 2020 mirror the rights to work, education, food, and social security guaranteed under the covenant. These enactments also give effect to Articles 39, 41, 43, 45, and 47 of the Constitution. National policies such as National Health Policy 2017, National Housing Policy 1998 further operationalize social economic directives. The Planning Commission, now Niti Aayog, and welfare schemes under various 5 year plans were originally designed to fulfill the DPSP's objectives without making them justiciable. This demonstrates that India treats the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural rights compliance not merely as an international obligation but as a domestic constitutional duty. Legislative action thus act as the bridge between the moral ideals of DPSPs and the binding legal commitment of the covenant. Equality, non discrimination, and a social justice. Both the Covenant and the Indian Constitution rest upon the principle of equality. Article 2 of the Covenant and Articles 14 to 16 of the Indian Constitution prohibits discrimination on grounds such as race, sex, religion, and origin. Article 38 and 46 of the Constitution go further by directing the state to reduce inequalities and promote the welfare of weaker sections. These align with Articles 3, 7, and 10 of the Covenants, which ensure gender equality, fair wages, and family protection. The Indian judiciary has consistently upheld this principle in cases like Indira Sohani versus Union of India 1992, which upheld reservations for backward classes as part of social justice. Both frameworks treat equality as a dynamic concept, not merely formal equality before law, but a substantive equality that seeks to uplift disadvantaged groups. Together, they ensure that democracy serves as a vehicle for equitable and rather for equitable social transformation. Global obligation and India's international commitments. India ratified the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights on uh, 10th April 1979, affirming its commitment to the progressive realization of social economic rights. As a member of the United Nations Human Rights Council, India regularly submits reports to the Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights under Articles 16 to 25 of the Covenant. These reports outline legislative, judicial, and administrative measures taken to implement these rights. The committee's concluding observations have consistently acknowledged India's progress in poverty reduction, education, and women's empowerment while recommending strong social protection and environmental safeguards. The Ministry of External Affairs coordinate this through this reporting process with the National Human Rights Commission, that is NHRC. Through such engagements, India demonstrates that domestic constitutional provisions like DPSPs and global human rights commitments are complementary rather than contradictory. Uh, this way, reinforcing a unified vision of human development and constitutional morality. Conclusion, convergence of global and constitutional ideals. The Covenant and the DPSPs together represent two dimensions of the same ideal. The purpose is same, realization of human dignity through social and economic justice. While the covenant functions as a binding international treaty, the DPSPs serve as the moral and constitutional framework guiding national policy. Judicial interpretation and legislative initiatives have effectively integrated these two systems, making social economic rights a central part of Indian constitutional governance. Through Articles 38, 39, 41, 43, 45, 47, and 48A, India's constitution mirrors almost every substantive provision of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. This convergence exemplifies how international human rights norms can strengthen domestic constitutions and vice versa. In practice, the DPSPs transform global commitments into local action, um, thereby ensuring that freedom from want becomes as real as freedom from fear. The harmony between the Covenant and the Indian Constitution thus reaffirms India's role as a democratic welfare state committed to human dignity, equality, and social justice. Thank you.